You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Every Monday on Soundside, we catch you up on the top stories that are fascinating right now and what they say about the Pacific Northwest. We call it Front Page. And joining me today for a doozy of a news day, Mike Lewis, journalist, editor at Geekwire, and owner of the Streamline Tavern here in Seattle's Lower Queen Anne. Mike, wow, I can't believe you agreed to come in after all when all this is going on.
Like I said before the show, Libby, we have been like 1 degree of separation for about 20 years in this town. So it's very nice to be on air with you.
Yeah, long time. You spent at KUOW Radio, which is where I cut my teeth in the journalism world. So yeah, really nice to be on the air. And let's launch right in.
Don't ask me who's in charge because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It means we're in charge.
We're in charge of Venezuela, that is. That was President Trump speaking to a reporter on Air Force One last night. The ousted president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, appeared in a federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan just a short time ago as we're speaking. He pleaded not guilty to a range of charges, including drug trafficking and narco-terrorism. Maduro told the judge, quote, "I was captured and I am a decent man, the president of my country." That's according to the Associated Press. And that's a wild introduction to this story, Mike, but it has been just a wild couple of days in U.S. foreign policy. In case folks have been out of the loop, Americans woke up on Saturday morning to the news that U.S. Army Delta forces had conducted a raid on a compound in Caracas, capturing Maduro and his wife, killing at least 80 people, according to a Venezuelan official who spoke to the New York Times. And again, you heard President Trump. He was echoing comments from a news conference on Saturday where he said that the U.S. will run Venezuela and that the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who's been sworn in as interim president, is, quote, essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. So, Mike, where were you when you heard that we were running Venezuela, that we have arrested and captured the president of a sovereign nation, that we are going to try him in a court in New York? I mean, take it away. There's so many different directions you could go with this.
Yeah, so I get, like I think a lot of people in the journalism business, I get way too many phone alerts on when something big happens. And sure enough, I got pinged on this one very early in the morning. And I got to say, I did not think it was going to get to this. I assumed that they were, I mean, what I think has been happening, what typically happens in these cases is you put loads of pressure, you try and find that third safe country for someone to go to. Syria is a great example of this. And then you get them to eventually make a reason to go there, and they get set up in some sort of permanent, glorious retirement existence, and they leave their mess behind. And that's what was expected to happen here. And then we have a president without a lot of patience in that regard, and then things change very rapidly.
Maduro was offered, according to the Wall Street Journal, to have amnesty, to be able to have an escape plan with him and his inner circle, that this was offered several times, and he didn't take it, and the Trump administration decided to go in. You know, let's talk first about what this is going to mean for Venezuela. I think that there's a lot of question marks. I have Venezuelan people in my life that I know, and, you know, texting with them so far over the past 48 hours, they're saying basically, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty. But most of all, it seems as though the same bad people who were in power, you know, most of them are still in power. Like, Maduro's out. Maduro was a terrible despot, a guy who stole the 2024 election, who suppressed opposition, arrested opposition, was probably overseeing, state police murdering people and extrajudicial
He disappeared a lot of people.
Killing. He disappeared a lot of people. I mean, this is not a good person, but that kind of throat clearing is what we do before we say, is it really the U.S.'s role here to literally play world police?
Well, we've certainly got a lot of evidence of us doing that. So I don't know. I think it's a role we've adopted. I mean, go back in history and we can get into the Panama comparison, which is being made frequently right now. It's going to be interesting where this goes from here, because a couple of things happen. And the weird thing is, it's a complicated, I've talked to some Venezuelans as well, and it's a complicated reaction to this because no one wanted to see the guy there. I mean, that I talked to. No one also thinks that a country shouldn't have its own sovereign rights to declare to find its own leaders. Although in this particular case, it's very, very clear that he manipulated an election to stay in power.
Yeah, the Washington Post reported that its analysis indicates that the opposition candidate in 2024 likely won 2/3 of the vote.
Exactly.
I mean, this was, a clear illegal election to stay in power after that.
Absolutely it was. And so that's what happened. And the parallels with so what a lot of people are making comparisons to, if you're not familiar with the history, is Panama in 1989. Panama in 1989. And for full disclosure, my mom is Panamanian, and I've got relatives down there, and I've spent a lot of time in Panama as a child and as an adult. And when the United States government finally got tired of dealing with Manuel Noriega, I mean, it's an interesting thing because he was somewhat allied with the United States when we needed him, and then when we stopped needing him, and when he manipulated an election, suddenly we decided that maybe we're done with this guy, and we went in and invaded and removed somebody. And people are making the comparisons, but it was a very, very different situation.
Yeah, tell me why, because that is the comparison, and I see a lot of op-eds by folks saying that the court proceeding where Maduro is going to be tried, the precedent is going to be stemming from that Noriega case, the idea that Noriega tried and Maduro probably will, that he had immunity because he's the president of a country. All of this, the comparisons are being made everywhere. So why is it different, according to you?
So, I mean, the comparisons are not necessarily false. They're valid, but the situation and the histories are very, very different. Panama exists because the United States essentially liberated it from Colombia during the Teddy Roosevelt administration. The Panamanians weren't quite aware that they needed to be liberated from Colombia, but we wanted a canal project to move ahead, and everybody wanted a canal project who moved big goods through the ocean, wanted a canal project to move ahead. It wasn't moving ahead, so hence liberation. But then the United States established the Canal Zone, and the Canal Zone was this bastion of American presence. I mean, literally the center 10 miles wide of the country was U.S. property, effectively. And 250,000 Americans lived down there. Just prior to this, that's how my mom met my dad. My dad was stationed in the military there, met my mom. They got married down there and then moved back up to the United States. There are hundreds of sort of half Panamanians, around Seattle as well as around the United States who have the same exact story. But so when we did this in Panama, we had 27,000 troops on the ground, and it was much different environment as far as how Panama felt about the United States, which was always been a little bit complicated, but it was not a country that did not essentially owe a portion of its existence to the United States. Venezuela is a very different situation. Plus, sort of the naked ambition about the oil that Venezuela has.
Oil, I have to say, there's not much that shocks me anymore, but that press conference on Saturday where President Trump pretty much dispensed, after some initial comments, with talking about drug trafficking at all. And it was all about, this is oil infrastructure that was stolen, by Venezuela when they nationalized the oil industry. It was just sort of the gloves off, bare knuckle. We are there to open up the extraction of this country's natural resources. This is about Exxon and their interests. This is about American oil companies getting that crude pumping. I mean, is there something refreshingly honest about the fact that the U.S. is being open about their ambitions in that way, whereas before we might have said this is about, improving the lives of the Venezuelan people. That's primarily, or spreading democracy, like a neocon, project in Iraq or Afghanistan. I mean, or is there something? I mean, for me, it felt like I've never heard anybody before just truly come out and say this is a war for oil.
Yeah, so I mean, and this is where I was sort of headed with this. This is the weird thing here is that the literal comparison with Panama is partially true, but the better comparison, honestly, is Iran. Because what we did in Iran was essentially install the Shah because Mossadegh, the prior leader, had nationalized the oil.
That was in the 50s when there was a democratically elected leader, but it was against the U.S. interests.
And against oil interests primarily. And And so, because it had been owned essentially by the British, they got forced out.
Yeah, I was going to say it was kind of a UK and
exactly,
US
and
project.
US project because it was that situation is much more similar. Although from a leadership standpoint, Maduro, the former leader in Iran, was considered actually probably a great long-term bet for the United States, but we wanted the oil right away. Maduro is not well liked by anybody in any administration in any country.
Yeah.
But as far as the naked ambition for the oil and the desire to get that, and the fact that they stated it publicly, I mean, I guess that's a sliver of good in an otherwise terrible situation, because it's exactly why we're there.
When you take out a country's leadership, there's a lot of dominoes that fall afterwards. I think that the decision to go with the Delcy Rodriguez transition into power instead of Maria Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, the leader of the opposition, again, it's not in line with what a U.S. of 10 or 20 years ago would have done, but it's expeditious if you want to get oil pumping faster and if you want to avoid the kind of vacuum that maybe you would have seen in Libya or elsewhere.
Well, but I would also say
Yeah.
it's really effective because you need someone beholden to you.
Yeah.
If she is put in power, that's a person who has an electorate already. It has the backing of the people. The new leader doesn't, but that leader is dependent entirely on the U.S. influence to stay in power. So, I mean, they made the pragmatic decision. We need someone beholden to us. We don't need someone independent.
Compliant. Delcy
Exactly.
Rodriguez says that she is extending an invitation to the U.S. government to collaborate on a, quote, agenda of cooperation aimed at shared development with the framework of international law to strengthen
Bingo.
lasting community coexistence. We're going to work on, members of Congress, mostly Democrats in Washington state, obviously decrying the illegality of what they say was, an act of war without authorization by Congress. All those other threads we're going to be following this week. But, Mike, it's, truly like a new chapter, uncharted, but as you say, maybe charted in a smaller way, period in American foreign policy.
Yeah, we've done these things before, and sometimes not as openly.
Yeah.
So I don't know that this is such
from Brazil to Guatemala. I mean, the
Right.
number of governments in Latin America that we have toppled and installed leaders that then, created a lot of problems for their people.
Completely.
Obviously, a long history there. Okay, got to turn the page.
I'm going to need you to come back here again and again and again. Because the progress that we need to make is not just handed down from City Hall. Things have never been given to us without people organizing and demanding change from those in positions of power.
Katie Wilson was sworn in on Friday as the new mayor of Seattle. She gave a speech at City Hall, promised to work every day to make the city a place where everyone can live a dignified life. Quote, whatever your background, whatever your income. Mike, I think we're just going to touch on this because, we're going to continue following the Wilson administration for
Right.
many years to come. But I haven't gotten a chance to hear what you think about her campaign, Democratic socialist in office in Seattle, her promises versus the reality of governing. Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, she squeaked by, right? And I was more surprised, honestly, at Bruce Harrell's pretty tepid campaign for most of it. I think there was the impression that it was a gimme. I don't know.
I think before the primary, that certainly sounds
but
like
it wasn't
what the
that
impression
much
was.
more active after the primary. I mean, I was surprised. But nonetheless, setting that aside, I think what's interesting is that the most interesting thing that I think she has done at this point is hiring as deputy mayor Brian Surratt. Brian Surratt, his entire history in Seattle is sort of a middle-of-the-road, business-friendly leader, the Economic Development Council, things like that. I mean, like that is not the person as a mayor who has sort of been saddled with this idea of ultra progressive. That is not the person you put in power if you're not looking to assure businesses like, hey, wait a minute. Yes, I do feel those things, but I understand I got to lead the whole city. I think people are going to be, especially people who are concerned about it returning to the city council days under former Mayor Jenny Durkin.
The Shama Sawant days.
The Shama Sawant days. I think anyone who's concerned about that, this is not what's going to happen here. I think that she's showing every sign of being a much more pragmatic thinker. I think if people want to find out where the change is going to happen, I don't think the city can spend enough money to make a real dent in affordable housing. I don't think that that's possible for any city, honestly, in America to do this. But where you can do something significant is expanding the upzoning. And I think that and density of housing.
Although that started under Mayor Harrell with the comprehensive plan. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it really even started a little bit prior to that. And the conversion of the remaining commercial industrial zoned areas in Seattle, I think those are the areas where you're going to find change, because I think that is, you need to sort of remand this to the commercial market to essentially solve it by building a whole load of housing. I think there's bigger structural problems than that as far as solving the affordable housing, but I think that's where you're going to see her active, is exactly on that.
She's coming on later this week to talk with me and my Sound Politics co-host Scott Greenstone, so I'm looking forward to speaking with now Mayor Wilson. The 4,000 shelter beds, that's a big promise, obviously something that our city desperately needs. But she has a lot of people rooting for her, including people that would be her natural political enemies. I mean, I talked to Sarah Nelson in her exit interview, the former city council president, who said she finds her to be really upfront with what she wants for the city, with what she says she's going to do, and that she's rooting for her. And so, I think, as you say, some signs that she's willing to reach towards the business community and others. Yeah.
I've talked to several people who are immediately didn't like the idea of her getting elected, and then sat down and talked with her and found she's kind of refreshingly candid and very smart. And yes, lacking in experience on being a mayor, but everyone is lacking in experience in being a mayor if they haven't been a mayor before.
We're going to move on really quickly because there's a big story developing in our community with reverberations across the country.
We need public officials, elected officials that the Somali community has elected for, to step up and publicly state that this is unacceptable behavior.
That is Asia Adam, executive director of Our Hope. It's a West Seattle nonprofit that serves immigrants and refugees. She spoke to KUOW reporter Amy Radel last week after she and other Somali community members met with Governor Bob Ferguson and other Seattle area officials. Adam says that Somali child care providers in Washington are being harassed in person and doxxed online. Now, this all stems from the fallout of a 43-minute video that was posted by conservative content creator Nick Shirley day after Christmas, I believe. And that video claimed to show fraud by Minnesota-based Somali daycares. Now, Shirley's video inspired local here in the Seattle area right-wing influencers to start showing up at the doorsteps of home-based daycares in South King County, mostly Tukwila and Kent. And these content creators are questioning the legitimacy of the businesses, alleging fraud. Mike, I don't know if you've seen these videos. They basically knock on doors.
A couple of them.
And nobody maybe shows up, or there's no kids visible inside the businesses. They don't think it looks like a real business. And so they say, why are these people getting tens of thousands of dollars of subsidies for this? Drop-bys on YouTube, not really the classic way that you investigate social services being
not
distributed.
Exactly, no.
It's not a traditional investigatory procedure. Obviously, very closely linked story with Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota announcing he's not running for re-election. What do you make of what's going on right now in our community and nationally?
Yeah, I mean, this is really unfortunate, the way that this is playing out. I get it. There have been scandals associated with new or new-ish immigrant communities before. I mean, Sacramento had a big deal with Russian immigrants and welfare fraud in the 1990s. Huge scandal. We've got this one. I mean, historically there has been a lot of that, and the United States has a troubling history of blaming immigrant groups on many things. I mean, that's been since the end of the 19th century, much less now. The thing about the Somali issue is that this played so perfectly into the drumbeat of the administration, the anti-immigration drumbeat. And so if you think this is going to end anytime soon, I've got news for you. And the bigger thing, though, is that if you are a part of one of these groups doing this, you better gird yourself for a lot of public disclosure. I mean, this is going to happen now. People are out there and they're doing this, and it's not even really doxing as much as it's just creating impressions, right? There's nothing in many cases to dox. We're talking about from a percentage of the 120,000 Somalis that have come in the United States over the course of the last 15, 20 years. We're talking about, 0.05%.
In Minnesota, 60 to 90 folks have been prosecuted.
Right.
60 have been convicted.
Yeah. Right, at this particular point.
But it's more than a billion
scandal. Yes.
likely in fraud in Minnesota. It is hard to comprehend how much fraud had been going on there. Yeah,
absolutely. But what doesn't play as well into these right-wing influencers are, say, $7 billion in scandal by Wells Fargo. The other, I'm not trying to create false equivalencies. What I'm saying is that this thing is going to be manipulated as an anti-immigration stance, and I'm hoping that people actually see through it, because it's hardly the first government services fraud we've dealt with. Remember the employment security problem in the United States, in Washington State, in the pandemic. It was $600 million. And that was, overseas players, again, blamed mostly on sort of Nigerian hackers. This is the type of thing that happens. It's unfortunate that it did, but, I feel bad for the Somali community getting caught in the crossfire on this, when I'm sure most of those organizations are not represented, by what's happening in Minnesota.
Yeah, hard to take it as a good faith effort at rooting out fraud when it does target a community so specifically that
with
is, again,
almost no evidence.
Yeah,
locally.
With a underlying political context.
Absolutely.
That this is an administration that likes to find scapegoats in the immigrant community.
Right.
I will just also add that DCYF, the Washington Department of Children, Youth, and Families, has said that they have systems in place to monitor potential misuse of child care funds. But the public trust is really important at this moment, and people do need a lot of communication about how fraud is rooted out, and, assurances that we don't have wider issues here in Washington State. And, I hope that we see more communication from the governor and everybody on that.
100%.
Front page wrapping today. Mike Lewis, thank you so much for being here. It's been really fun to talk about the news with you.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or, of course, on your favorite podcast app.